Well, good morning. You are usually the person. The way we do this, you get it going and I come in to the Zoom room and you're already there. And so you're like, hey.
I always, So first I'm waiting for you. Not that you're late. It's just that I get there about 30 seconds before. I decline your note taker, your AI note taker. It's sort of my thing. I check to make sure I've got my mic on. And then you come on and I say, hello, Jamie. And today you started with the hello. So that's very nice.
There it is.
I would like to ask you, I'm going to just jump right in because Mark Bedell is our guest. This is an encore episode. Mark and I knew each other in Missouri. He was the Kansas City superintendent, did remarkable things there, and took a district that was unaccredited to full accreditation and really and should be celebrated. And he will be the first to say, this is not me. This is our team. We do this all together. And you'll hear in the conversation when I say you have all these accolades, but the ones that you actually want to talk about are the ones where students said that you were their champion. And so I love that. And we'll get into that in a minute. And then his after action review is about a year-round school model. And so that's where I wanted to start, if that's okay, is to ask, do you have any familiarity with year-round schools? Have you been a part of them?
Yeah. Yes. We've actually had some similar conversations about other aspects of schooling, but this is another example of where year-round school, I'm a fan of the innovation of trying something else. What I'm not a fan of is year-round school because this isn't a people decision. This is usually a budget decision. We don't have enough space.
That's exactly right.
Forcing kids into this building over this period of time merely because we don't have another building and we haven't been able to pass a bond or whatever it is. And
I'm gonna remind you of one additional system piece. When you think about systems and you think about the system structure, and the system structure includes policies and laws and regulations and those types of things, that because a system's behavior is influenced by its structure. So the way that people behave and the way the system behaves. So I taught for 4 years at Arundel Elementary School before moving to other schools in Oakland, California. And Arundel was a year-round school. Mm-hmm. And so here we were A, B, C, and D, and I was in Track C. Mm-hmm. And Track C often was affectionately called the Chicano track because all the bilingual Spanish classes were in Track C. And I can understand how that happened. I mean, if you're going to have everybody 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and you want siblings to be on the same track and then cousins to be on the same track, and then this was the bilingual track. Okay.
Yeah.
And we were there because of space. 750 kids, but only room for 550. And so the first 2 years I was in Trailer C. And then for the next 2 years, I was a roving teacher, which I don't know. I feel like culturally made sense. I'm part of the chosen people. We roamed for 40 years. I had my kids, but every 3 weeks I had to move to a classroom that had been vacated by the teacher going off track. And so we had these 2 rolling cabinets and we would be like a line of ants. We would move to the next classroom. So every 3 weeks, we would lose a couple of days packing up our room, moving to the new room, setting up the room, and then keep going. So I agree with you. I really like the idea of saying, look, we're not a agrarian society anymore. We don't need the summers to work on the farms necessarily. And so why would we take 8 weeks off? Why not have these cycles of 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, have 3 weeks of maybe intervention or enrichment. Families are working. They don't have to figure out what to do with their kids for 3 weeks. The market can respond or the school district can respond and provide those types of services, giving teachers a little bit of a break, as well as to come back and plan and review what went on those 9 weeks and who needs additional support. What a great model for supporting kids. When I mentioned the system, and sorry for monologuing here for a second, but when thinking about the system, particularly in California, in 1997 or 8, when Pete Wilson signed the class size reduction law, unintended consequence was, if you're going to have required kindergarten through 3rd grade can have no more than 20 students, you're going to need a lot more teachers and you're going to need a lot more space.
Can I say 2 follow-ups to this?
Please.
2 different things. First thing is I have seen terribly run year-round schools, and I know of one specifically in North Carolina, and the principal is amazing at it. They have it down perfectly. And they're not tracked, so it's not multi-track year-round, which is a different thing.
Yeah, because that was space. That was all about space.
But I just want to say that back to the leader creating a culture that works for the community that is a part of that system. It works. And so they wouldn't have it any other way. She doesn't lose very many teachers. They stay. That tells you that they have, though cultural context of the US is one in which summertime is seen as time off, that people still take vacation. The reason why the world is so impacted around the world for quote unquote vacation during July is really because that's now the culture of the US. But for her, they've been able to adapt and change it and have everybody be bought in and connected to this model. That's number one. Number two, so I would just want to indicate like there are positive models. Number two, the roaming teacher. I talk about this because it's a Chinese model, that there are schools in China where the kids stay in one classroom.
Not some schools. That's how school is, how it operates.
Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know if it was all schools.
Oh, yeah. Japan, South Korea.
Stay, and the teachers move.
Yes.
So the classroom isn't the teachers, it's the kids.
Yes. And they have responsibilities. There's a captain in the classroom who is responsible for making sure they are ready for the teacher. In fact, in the schools that I've visited, 3 different cities in China and in Japan, is that the student stands up and says to the teacher as the teacher arrives, the children stand up and they say, "We are ready to learn."
Oh my God. That's great. I love that. I just don't think mindset-wise the U.S. is set up that way. We, as Americans, see the classroom as the teacher's classroom.
Yeah, and there's parts of it that I like because it's the teacher is the host or we say in loco parentis, right, in the absence of parents. And so they become this, "You're welcome to my home. However, it should be our home." And so some teachers do such a marvelous job of creating that sort of covenant or contract or the constitution or whatever they call it, as to say, in our home, this is what we believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the work, though. And some teachers, this may be one of the key differences between you and I, in that I taught more secondary than I did elementary. You taught more elementary than you did secondary. I think the mindset of a secondary teacher, not all, please, not all, but there is a mindset, and I'll speak for myself, where we are trained to be teachers of a content, not teachers of children. So we end up being content experts. And so while elementary teach everything and end up focusing on child development and focusing on kids, that even in the training of becoming a secondary teacher, the amount of work on child development is near nothing. How much did we study The Great Gatsby? Quite a lot. These two things, that mindset makes it more difficult for us to actually shift it's my classroom. Yeah, it's my classroom. We're going to be talking about The Great Gatsby. No, it doesn't matter where you're from. We're talking about Great Gatsby.
Okay, so then let me take us back to our guest, Mark Bedell, who clearly understood as a superintendent and as a leader that more important than anything was to connect with the kids and the community before trying to serve in any kind of leadership capacity about the content of leading a school district, was to actually work with families and take pride in doing that with kids. So why don't we get into the conversation?
Yeah,
You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stievelman.
I'm Jamie Almanzan.
And we will see you on the backside of this. Today in An Imperfect Leader, Dr. Mark T. Bedell is my guest. Mark and I became friends during his 6 years as superintendent of the Kansas City Public Schools, but Mark is no longer a Missouri resident. He began a 4-year term as superintendent of An Arundel County Public Schools on July 1st, 2022, Maryland's 4th largest school district. And I can tell you this about Mark. He's talented, he's caring, he sees himself first and foremost as a teacher, and he does not shy away from the role of an administrator. And that means he's got a proven track record of success in urban districts. He led the Kansas City Public Schools to full accreditation status for the first time in more than 20 years. Mark Bedell, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Hey, Pete, thanks for having me, man. Good to see you. And I am excited to have an opportunity to have this dialogue with you about my imperfections as a superintendent.
Oh, man, I really appreciate that. It is so good to see you, too. I was looking at your biography, and something stood out to me. You've got all of these honors and all these accolades associated with your time in public service. And more than any of those recognitions, you listed how in 2018, the students at Southeast High School in Kansas City presented you with an award for your efforts on their behalf and the positive impact that you have on future students, or that you would have on future students. And then in 2022, kids in the middle college program, they named you Superintendent of the Century. It's pretty good. But here, this is the thing. Mark, I have a sense on what you're going to say, and I mean this, that you have spent your career pushing for educational equity. But if you will, would you tell us why those accomplishments, students telling you that you've made a difference in their lives, why that's so important to you?
Because students don't have an agenda, Pete. If students come out and they give you that type of acknowledgement or want to bring Channel 41 News to a board meeting to surprise you because they believe that what you're doing will improve their lives, but in most cases, not just their lives, but their siblings that were upcoming that would benefit even more than they are benefiting. To me, there's no agenda with that award. I think there are some awards that people get, to me, that become very superficial. It's almost like you're being acknowledged on this list, and you're on this list because it's an opportunity for the newspaper or the magazine to generate ad money, and it's not really about impact. And so there is a reason why you rarely ever will see me post or even retweet or go on to Twitter and any of the awards that I have received. And I've received a lot of them. But I think for me, for children, for students to say he's making a difference, that's the work, man. And that's validation that what I'm doing really is paying dividends for them, because kids are honest. They're very authentic. And if they're not feeling you or they don't believe in you, they will let you know that too. So that's the reason why I mentioned those two, because I know that there is true authenticity coming from these students around the impact that they felt that we've had on them.
You know, in the leadership model that I've been using to advise others, there's this dimension called collective aspiration, which is really the heart of an organization's work. And inside that dimension is a term, an ethic of excellence. Now, this isn't ethics, it's an ethic, an ethos. And I like to think of an ethic of excellence as documenting the process towards success. Now, you've had so much success in your career, and I know your new district presents new opportunities to build on existing successes as well as to continue to grow as a leader. And when leaders change districts, they begin the process anew of building relationships inside and outside the organization. Some leaders ask questions like, what must we continue doing or stop doing or start doing in order to ensure the success with our learning priorities? I wonder if you'd just take a moment to describe the process that you have been using to build this ethic of excellence in your new district.
One of the things that I have always done since I've moved into senior leadership is I try to refer to some of the books and some of the literature that I've read to allow me to grow as an individual. One of those being Jim Collins' Good to Great. And so this really goes to a comment that you just made around ethics, right? I always tell everybody about his motto for level 5 leadership and something that I strive towards as a leader. One, to possess a high degree of humility. So to let people know that I don't take any of what I have in life for granted, because I know it can be taken away with the snap of a finger, but to also have the professional will to do right by those that you serve. So at the end of the day, I often tell people, I'm here to do the work for children. If you go back and listen to my interview when I interviewed in Kansas City, I said 3 things at the end of that interview. I don't have any experience. I may not be the most polished person to grace this stage, and I'm not a political person, right? So if you're looking for characteristics with those 3 things, I'm not your candidate. But if what I do bring to the table is I have a personal life story that connects with the community I'm looking to serve. I have the body of work of having demonstrated success leading struggling schools during my time as an assistant soup teacher and principal. And I'm not going to compromise my values and beliefs to hurt children. So I do the same thing here, right? I'm in a good system that I'm trying to take to great, but I'm having to help everybody understand that, we're going to do this together, and giving them the side of me that is, I'm here to make sure that all of your kids succeed. And I don't need this job to survive. I mean, and that's just I'm not sounding arrogant. I'm just being honest. Like, people have figured out over these last couple of years, especially with the pandemic, what they're willing to put up with and what they aren't going to put up with. And what I'm not willing to put up with is trying to keep a job just for security purposes, but I'm harming children. And I think that has connected with this community.
It's interesting. You made a statement about making decisions with people, and you made a statement that really sort of resonated for me, and I think for those who are listening, which is that you make decisions with in mind with the people who are most impacted by that decision. And in this case, your default is always children. How will this decision impact children? How will it impact their learning? How will it impact their safety? How will it impact the psychological safety, in terms of feeling good about where they're going? Are they valued and they're honored? I think that is what makes you stand out as compared to others. I ask this question to every guest who comes on the podcast, so I'll ask it to you. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate with you?
I think for me, really allowing for people to know that you're human. Oftentimes people view superintendents as being inhuman, almost like we are computer brained or computer minded robots that are, far away from this earth. And what I try to do is I try to upfront disarm people by letting people know that as much success as I've had in my life, I made a ton of mistakes and I will continue to make mistakes. And all I ask in advance is for people to offer a level of grace, because those mistakes, they're not going to be reckless in nature. They are going to be very intentional in trying to advance the social, emotional, and academic outcomes for children. And in that means that I may fail. I may fall from time to time. And so, Pete, I like to be upfront with people that I don't have the magic potion. And if you think that I have the magic potion, then I'm not the right candidate. I don't want to lead people. But I think the impossible can be done working together as a community and trying to figure out where can we draw on the commonalities rather than always focusing on the things we don't agree with and pushing ourselves apart. So I really view an imperfect leader as somebody who can admit that they're not perfect.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of An Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR. We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. My guest again is Dr. Mark Bedell, Superintendent of Anne Arundel County Public Schools. In this segment, we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they had to make, and then we just discuss it. Mark, what happened?
I made a number of mistakes over my 6 years in Kansas City, to be very clear with you. So it's so many I can draw off of, but I think I'll go off of one where we tried to do a year-round model for one of our elementary schools, and it was in one of the poorest neighborhoods inside of Kansas City. And so what we thought in doing this was that we had the right principal, which I was 100% for certain that we had the right principal. We had the right staff that he had brought in and built the school up. He had increased the school enrollment by about 100 students. And this was one of the schools designated as a failing school according to the Missouri assessment program. And so we wanted to try to do something different. So we said, let's try to do this year-round model. And when we got into doing this year-round model, part of what ended up happening was it ended up just being an extension of the school year. So it wasn't a true year-round model. And we just didn't think it all the way out. So the kids basically, instead of going to summer school, they would in essence just stay at that school and they would get that additional month of learning in through the end of June. But what we also didn't take into account was the environment how competitive the environment was for children during the summer. So there's so many, because Kansas City is a charter-oriented community. And then there's a lot of other service providers that are able to work with school districts and work with charters during the summer. Everybody's competing for kids. And so what ends up happening is some of these entities were like, hey, we will offer the parent $400 if their kids stay with us throughout the entirety of the summer. So then that ultimately compromised what we were trying to do, because parents kind of made a decision, really it's the end of the year and this is just an extension. We're going to pull our kids out and we're going to put them in the summer program. And so I don't think that we got the results that we were looking for in that model. And I wish that there was something that we could have done differently. So to be very clear with you, I've learned around what I would do differently as a result. And we'll probably talk about that in a little bit.
Yeah, that's right. We're going to dig into that. And it's interesting because I do know to the north of you in North Kansas City, they had 2 year-round schools. And we also went and visited them. And
talked to their principals and got all excited and energized. And similarly, it was, okay, but is this just going to be another 30 days of the same? And so a kid goes, I could go swimming through the Parks and Rec program, or I could go and do this to this other group, and to your point, that they're paying, parents are like, $400, I'll take that and send my kid back to school later. But right now, I'm going to choose something different. That's so interesting. So one of the questions that we ask is what got overlooked? And you began to talk through, there were other summer options, right? So you felt like you had the right principal, you felt you had good staff, there were other summer options. As you were looking through this, what got overlooked in terms of programming, or what would you say got overlooked?
I think the instructional programming wasn't as thorough as it needed to be, because it basically resulted in us having to work on telling kids in over a 19-day period, you need to learn everything you didn't learn over a 175-day period. So it was just more of the same. So it was in name a year-round program, but truthfully, it just wasn't. And I think that was one. The curriculum really wasn't thorough, in my opinion, or right for us to really hold anybody accountable for what those additional 19 days would yield. Because I'm a big data person, right? So I remember coming back and reporting to the board on the evaluation of this model. And I was like, we bombed on this. Like, this is something that we need to stop because it's not working. And that was part of the problem. So I think, and then just not really getting a full-blown commitment, like getting parents to sign and agree to an MOU that they were going to keep their kids there through the entirety of the extension of the school year. So we took hits on attendance rates and all of that. It just ended up being bad. It wasn't properly synchronized with our student information system, learning management system. It was just a lot of mistakes that we made. But the good news was it was one school. We didn't really harm kids, to be honest with you. But it was a model that I think if we would have just thought more thoroughly on it, it could have been phenomenal.
Yeah, and it's interesting. I was thinking about something you said earlier in our conversation, which is that you are not a politician, right? A politician can stand up there and say, we're going to do year round. Everyone goes, oh, look at this. He's dynamic. He's innovative. They're going to do year round. Yet what you are is an educator who looked back at your data and said, so what are we doing for kids and how is it going to improve their outcomes? And it doesn't seem to be working for us. So we really need to kind of step back and think differently about this. I'm curious about what you learned about relationships, or what new relationships were formed.
I mean, I think where people were excited about it was that at least we were trying to do something different. So I'm real big on, I don't like to do things sloppy or raggedy. I really pride myself on wanting things to be polished, wanting things to be well thought out. And I also don't think that I did a good enough job of really putting my fingers on it and really helping to think all the way through it. And so some of that, I mean, at the end of the day, I own it as superintendent. It's my failure overall. But I think if I would have had my finger on the pulse a little bit more, if I would have potentially worked with funders differently and got them involved on the front end of it, we probably could have been able to come up with the resources to be competitive, to help support our parents and incentivize our kids to stay there.
Oh, that's interesting.
I just think there were some things that, because, Kansas City is the fourth wealthiest from a philanthropy standpoint in the country. And I don't think we leveraged that like we should have. So
right, you go to your Boys and Girls Clubs, you go to your United Way, you go to the Kaufman Foundation, I think is out of Kansas City, right? I mean, how to say to them, we're trying to do this and we're trying to do a year-round school. Here's our reason why. Here's what we think is going to happen. And they say, okay, let's wrap around you as opposed to,
So that's the part that I would tell you really was a missed opportunity for us, not truly utilizing some of the other service support entities or advocacy organizations and groups to help us, like from a big picture standpoint. The principal, I think, did a good job of that with his connections. I don't know from my position as superintendent, did I do enough to leverage the Hall Foundation, the Baum Foundation, some of these big companies that I think would have easily wrapped their arms around us and helped us with the resources.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the roles of a superintendent is to really think through it from a systems thinking perspective, specifically thinking through the internal and external relationships. And it sounds like internally, you had a really good thought about what you were going to achieve. Externally, how you could have leveraged those pieces and those relationships may have made a difference.
And leveraging the right people, because sometimes you can go and get money, and I'm not going to go into detail on this. I'll leave it for people who want to listen to it and they can draw their own conclusion. But not all money is good money too. Sometimes you can get money from an entity that really is out there to cause harm, and they just want to take and use your data and then weaponize it against you. And when you're in a highly competitive, market like we were in Kansas City, those are some of the other pitfalls that you have to be mindful of when you're out here trying to get money from certain entities.
Sometimes I ask for an example, and I think it's appropriate not to give an example here, although those who are listening and those who are, they're sort of commuting and they're driving and they're thinking about what you're saying, I think it's important for them to recognize that when they're looking for money, that there are some grant opportunities out there where the purpose of the money is not completely aligned to what you're trying to achieve, and to be really thoughtful and careful about what you do accept when you're accepting out external funds.
That's true. So true.
I think you told me what you could have done differently. I'm interested to know what frustrated you. So there's something like what got overlooked, and that's kind of from the system. One part of the system was we were just extending school. And so what kind of got overlooked there was the fact that maybe as a system, we could have thought differently about what year-round meant. Did we have a shared image of what year-round meant in Kansas City? But sometimes as a leader, we have to think about what frustrated us as individuals in terms of what we wish we had done differently.
Yeah, what frustrated me was not thinking innovatively like I am now. I learned a lesson from that I wish I would have thought about prior to embarking on that journey. But I guess this is also why you go through the process of beta testing things. It's a lot of things you learn from it. And being a former high school principal of a prominent engineering program, so I was fortunate that I had a neighborhood school that was a failing component. And then I had an engineering program that kids tested into when I was a high school principal in Houston, and sent, more kids to MIT in this history than the entirety of schools in the Houston Independent School District. But the engineering program taught me a lot about this whole spiral method of learning from your failures. Because in engineering, the beautiful thing about failing is you get to go back and you get to spiral, you get to learn. And even when you figure it out, there's always somebody else out there trying to innovate and trying to make what you've done even better. And that's the essence of engineering. And so it just taught me during my years there of understanding how to embrace failure. But even in failing, there were some simple things that, like I said to you earlier, that we could have done that really frustrated me, that we could have done differently. And so one thing I would tell you, that if I could do it all over again, and this is something that I'm pushing here in Anne Arundel County, I would have taken a different look at the model. The model would have been more of a trimester model. And here's the reason why I say do a trimester, because a trimester allows for you to provide the interventions for students immediately. So if school is, let's just say we do a trimester and it goes from August until November. So now you've covered whatever hadn't been learned during the last 2 weeks in August, September, October. You got the month of November to go back and work with these students. But here's the beautiful thing about this. That triggers your first trimester, your first intercession. So you would have an intercession, and for all of the kids that really need the support, and in this case, in this school, all of those kids will kind of be required to come. And for those 3 weeks, those kids are going to get intensive interventions and support and enrichment. For the kids who don't need it, they get enrichment. And then what ends up happening is everybody goes on break during Thanksgiving. Then you come back, and it may not be for all teachers, right? There may be certain teachers who want to do it. Other teachers may want to go on vacation. So you let them do it. You don't, because there's some kids who will need enrichment. So you work with other partners to give them enrichment where they don't necessarily have to take up additional space. And then you start the second trimester, which will go from December, you get your holiday break, and then it goes to March. And then you do intercession 2. So everything that hasn't been mastered, you got now to cover everything in December, January, February, March. You go all the way through the first 3 weeks. Everybody's on spring break. And then you do your third intercession. And now what it does is it really does, it's a whole different kind of model that you, because of the attendance requirements, all of those kind of things, you don't fall into this. You're only doing an extension of the year and telling kids they need to catch up on what they didn't learn in 19 days. You're catching them throughout the year. And I think we would have gotten phenomenal results had we done it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting. You're talking about 12 weeks on, 3 weeks off, or 9 weeks on, 3 weeks off, and giving teachers potentially a time a few days before kids even come back to make new groups, to create these flexible groupings, and to really be child-centered, as opposed to when you say 19 days, for those who are listening in Missouri, 19 is the number of summer school days that that you're adding basically to your schedule. And so you were doing an extension of the year, not a year-round schedule.
Correct.
That's really interesting. In the end, what was something that was good that came out of the situation?
I would say for me, it told me a lot about the building principal and the faculty and staff over there and their willingness to try to do something different. And they didn't buck up against it. There was excitement about it, even with the shortcomings. It showed me a lot around their characters, their character level. It showed me a lot around their willingness to want to embark on doing something different. And that made me proud. To be honest with you, like, we didn't see a lot of regression in the data, Pete. We just didn't see the data moving in the direction that we thought it would move through going to this 4-year model, because we just simply weren't able to reach the kids in a very controlled manner like we wanted to.
It also sounds like, as you've now moved to An Arundel, a different part of the country, that you're not afraid to attempt innovation, because you know that innovation does spark enthusiasm and excitement, as it did with this school that you were working with in Kansas City. It just has encouraged you to think about the system. And I didn't know about your work in Houston. However, this must come so naturally to you in terms of design thinking, system thinking, is to think about all those relationships internally, externally, how the different parts play with each other, because every good idea doesn't always become success if you haven't really thought about how they interact with each other.
That's right. And I mean, the beautiful thing about my experience in Houston is once I got promoted out of my high school, I was then assigned by the superintendent, Terry Greer, at the time, to be one of 3 school improvement officers over his project, Apollo 20. And so the Apollo 20 initiative took the 20 or either the 30, maybe it's the 30 lowest performing schools in the Houston Independent School District. And we really applied like charter tenets on them. We went to Austin and had to testify that we wanted to extend the school year. We wanted to add an additional hour to the school day. We wanted to give teachers incentive money to come over there. So some of our teachers that had the highest value add, how do we attract them into some of the lower performing schools, giving them a sign-on bonus, a retention bonus, and growth bonus based on how well they grew kids. So we got all of this support, a lot of support from the philanthropy in Houston. But I was fortunate. I was the guy that was working with the high schools. And guess what? They tracked it, your value add as a school improvement officer. They ranked us amongst the 24 of us. And I was blessed that by the time we got done with that work, I was ranked number 1. My schools had experienced more value add than other schools, but I also had an advantage because I had these additional resources being pumped into my school that maybe some of the other schools didn't have as a part of being a part of Apollo 20. But at the end of the day, I put in a lot of work. One of my worst schools, I spent 3 days there, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, every day being there, helping to put systems in place for a half of a year. So, there was a lot of hard work that went into getting that number 1 ranking too.
No, I know that's right. It's interesting too, because now I have a better understanding. You had a nuanced relationship to charter schools in Kansas City. You didn't see them necessarily as an enemy, as so many educators or leaders around the nation will sort of vilify charter schools. What I noticed, at least from the outside looking in, was you were looking for opportunities to partner, either share space and buildings, share bus lines. And I can't say that the charter school community was interested in doing very much for Kansas City public schools. However, I always saw you reaching out and saying, what can we do together? These are our kids. These are kids of Kansas City. These are our kids. So why don't we work together? And I noticed that quite a bit in your work. I don't know how you would respond to that.
I did, Pete. I tried to draw the line in the sand. I'm ultra competitive. So I don't want any listener or person listening to this to think that I was just kind of giving the red carpet over to them. That wasn't the case. We were very inefficient, and we ran data that showed that we were spending far more money into operations rather than money going into the classrooms. And I wanted to change that trajectory, but I also wanted to make it very clear that charters weren't as good as people were making them out to be. And so I'm one of those kind of people. I truly do believe that parents, if the school system isn't working or the schools aren't working for them, parents should have options. So I never opposed school choice. I oppose school choice when I believe that it has created an unlevel playing field where one entity is advantaged over the other. And that was the case in Missouri. The laws were skewed in favor of the charters. And all I ever did, Kelvin Adams and I, when we would go to Jefferson City, was to ask those legislators who were pro-charter, give us the same flexibility. And then let's talk about, who's performing and who's not performing. And I remember one legislator said to us, but if I give you that, then what's the purpose of it being a charter? I mean, like we were told together that wouldn't make sense. The charter should have those advantages. So it just, those kind of
and in
things,
Missouri, more than $1 billion of money spent on charter schools for schools that have already closed. So it
drove me crazy, man. But it surprised everybody on the charter side in Kansas City that I was willing to be open because they're already there. And you're absolutely right. Because of the mobility that we experience in the city, one way or another, we're going to see each other kids. So how do we try to do everything that we can to increase the academic performance of children so we can start maybe attracting families that want to come back to the city? And that was a whole nother dynamic. That's a whole nother
podcast
on the dynamics of
it's called the Hickman Mills Independence Grandview podcast. That's a very specific audience.
Just the safety factors in Kansas City. I just read something on news feed that I get on my cell phone where on Newsbreak, and it, just said Kansas City just had its second worst year with homicides. So no matter, we got the district fully accredited. I mean, you got all these other factors surrounding you that work against you moving the district forward, people want to come back.
What advice might you give to an aspiring leader?
Yeah, I would tell people the best thing you can do is be your authentic self. Don't come in trying to be something you aren't, because generally after being in some place within 6 months, you start to regress to who you really are. So do the people that hired you. People can put on a good face for the first couple of weeks, but then the true individuals will come out. So come out right from the start and be honest with people. The thing I try to tell people here is I recognize that we have a lot of entities that have agendas. I tell you right now, I'm not going to address everything on your agenda. And I don't want you leaving out of this room misinformed thinking that I will. I might look at 2 or 3 of those things that I can address, but everybody will get something. Everybody can't get everything that they want. So looking people in the face and telling them that right from the beginning sets you off on an honest and transparent tenure that I think you will be able to survive.
Right now, the national average for superintendents is now under 3 years. For urban superintendents, it's about 1.8. It's under 2 years. And so this is exactly the thing that we need to be doing for each other. In terms of, you use the word survive and it sounds so dire, and yet that is the word to some extent. You want to do good work for kids, you got to make sure you keep your job, but that doesn't mean that you undermine who you are or change who you are. And so I think that's really important. That's really good advice. Mark, you've been such a good friend to me over the years. And when I've struggled, you were a solid sounding board. What always inspired me about you was your strong, unwavering stance in favor of public education. Everything you've just said today. You've got such an ability to help people see the unbreakable connection between education and then those issues that are negatively impacting a community. You used community violence as an example, and that is a huge one. When educational opportunities don't exist, you know that children don't learn, right? When those opportunities are not there, but you have always prioritized the educational opportunities for all. And when you do that, you know that violence can decrease. When kids know that they've got hope, then they make other decisions. So I could talk about this for hours, but more than anything, I just want to thank you so much for your continued service to children, to their families, to faculties. And thank you so much for being my friend. Appreciate it.
Hey, man, I appreciate you. And I'll say this, you and I had a number of phone calls where I would call you and say, hey, Pete, man, this is what I'm dealing with. What are your thoughts, man? How do I navigate this? That relationship was reciprocated as we, especially dealing with personnel related things. I mean, there were some things that you and we talked about that we were both dealing with. And then on top of that, having to deal with some of the community factors, how some people showed up at board meetings. I mean, but you got to have that type of safety net. And then we ended up forming that thread with several other superintendents. And so we all kind of kept each other apprised of what was happening across the state. It was a real good period there, man. And then it started breaking up. You ended up stepping down, and then you had John Jungman who stepped down. And then, you just started seeing people, moving on to do their next, the next part of their careers elsewhere. And we lost some of that, man. We lost
Well, this is what I would say. We may have lost those roles, but not the friendships and not the history.
Right.
And as we keep moving into other areas and do different things, I think our connections stay strong and we can continue to do good things for people.
I agree, man. I agree.
All right, we're back. Peter, what has there ever been? I'm going back to the beginning of Dr. Bedell's opening, and that is, has there ever been an award that similar to the Superintendent of the Century, where students gave it to you, or even if it's a compliment, like I can tell you,
I'd
I'm sorry.
say, no, I never got an award like that. I will say I've gotten so many lovely notes as kids who are adults now who have written me notes. Recently, I actually sent it to my father because I was just so happy. It would just made me so happy to you do this work, and it's so grueling. And every one of us knows. And in fact, let me flip this to say, for those who are in leadership, if you have, I'm sure you're doing this, but if you haven't, I really encourage to create a little box and to, when you get these positive notes from parents, from staff, from the community, from students, from their families, print them out and put them in that box, because there are so many rough days in public ed, in educational leadership, that to take a moment and recognize and be reminded of the positive impact you have on others, I highly recommend. It's not an ego thing. It is about restoring for you your why. You have these values and they will get attacked and you'll just get beaten down because you represent the system. They don't see you as you. They see your title. And so they are angry and frustrated and scared and worried. And so they may not say always the nicest things. And so to be reminded of the positive impact and the path that you're taking for children, just to go back through those notes is just a great reminder. It really is. It's so restorative. So I highly recommend that.
I have a story related to this experience where I had a student. I was working in a school district, and one of the teachers came up to me and said, "You were my middle school English teacher." And I didn't recognize this person, not at all. And she said, I wanted to say hi, and I wanted to tell you that you had a profound impact on my identity. I didn't think I was worth a whole lot in middle school, and you made me feel really smart. You made me feel like I had something to give. And I don't remember this person at all. So both, I'm feeling embarrassed. I'm feeling embarrassed. And I don't know you. And I'm like, I love this compliment. Are you sure that was me? Because I don't. And what a profound compliment. Like profound. This is when they say, you'll be remembered by people and it will surprise you that these things will come out at some point. And that's how it felt. It just was like, wow, I'm surprised at age probably 24 that I had that impact on you. And thank goodness my care and not my ego came out in that moment.
That's really wonderful. It just sustains us. So I'm glad you asked that question. When I think about this conversation with Mark, it's really interesting to me because he had a very complex system navigating lots of different ways that schools operate in the Kansas City metropolitan area. So I imagine if you're in a metropolitan area, it's not dissimilar for you, that he had charter schools and he had your regular schools, and then the summer usually was filled with other agencies and entities providing services, and yet they had this idea that they should do a year-round school. And he was very clear. I had the right principal and good staff. We hadn't truly thought out all the different ways that this could go right and how it could go wrong. And clearly it didn't work. It didn't work for them in that moment.
Can I read a line that I think is both connects with who I am, as well as it just made me laugh. This goes to the humanness of Dr. Bedell. He says, I think people were excited about it, that we were trying to do something different. And I am big on, or I really don't like to do things sloppy or raggedy. The word raggedy here, I was like, oh my goodness gracious, this is exactly how I feel. Dee Dee and I, my wife and I, talk about how different we are and how I'm a finisher. I don't leave things undone. If I start something, I'm finishing it all the way. And it drives me bananas to have an unfinished project of any type. Physical labor, mental labor, whatever it is. Like I will never leave dishes in the sink, ever. It's raggedy. And so when he said that, I thought this all the way through, but the pressure to make a decision, and there it goes.
I like that.
Can we say, actually, I have one more question. Tell me a little bit about, but you both working in Missouri in pretty big districts. Tell me about what that experience was like. Like, how well did you know each other, and in what ways was Columbia different from Kansas City? Like, when he said I was superintendent of the Kansas City Public Schools, I'm like, my God, I'm so surprised by these big district people. I'm blown away by their ability to manage a system that seems so unwieldy.
Yeah, that's interesting. Where he is now in Arundel is much larger because it's a county district, and he's got city, suburban, and he's got one-room schoolhouses all the way out in some rural parts of Maryland. Kansas City is interesting because, like St. Louis, it has seen a real decrease in enrollment over the years. And Kansas City is a city that is sort of regrowing. There's sort of a move back to the city where there had been so much flight out to the suburbs. And so he actually had fewer students than I did. I had more students than he did. However, that's because he had about 18,000 students and then another 18,000 that were in charter schools that he didn't supervise or lead, yet understood that he wanted to have a relationship with. And he was pretty clear on, look, I'm competitive. However, I also recognize that we're all in the same ecosystem. Why wouldn't we try to find areas of compatibility and support? I mean, they had 36,000 kids or 40,000 kids, but in the end, they had fewer than we did. And yet he had so many moving pieces being a city with a lot of instability, kids moving from home to home, so high mobility. Our district had a 30% mobility rate, which was pretty big. 1 in every 3 kids was moving from one school to the other within a given year. And his, I think, was probably twice that. I mean, they were just a lot of moving parts. So I got to know him, and I got to know Calvin Adams, who was in St. Louis, and a few other superintendents that we just had more in common than different. And so we would spend time learning from each other. And then he was just an incredible safe place for me to ask questions, to be just incredibly vulnerable, to seek support. He was very wise. He is very wise. Yeah, I was always grateful for his friendship.
That's great.
One day he will likely be Secretary of Education when we can restore the Department of Education, when we can restore an educator in the Department of Education. He knows how to build consensus, build community, and lead children first and bringing adults along in the most meaningful way.
Maybe I can end with this. When he opened, he talked about his interview for it and saying, I'm not political. I know how to do some stuff. And if you want this political person, that's not me. I beg to differ.
Exactly. You and I have talked about the 3-legged stool of a superintendent: lead learner, CEO, and chief storyteller. Yeah. And he is a chief storyteller. He, in the sense, not fable, in the sense of he knows how to talk about a community, he knows how to talk about schools, and he knows how to navigate a highly political system. Nobody could have done what he did in terms of restoring its accreditation in Kansas City with his team, and then moving on to An Arundel and doing marvelous work there. He understands politics.
Yeah, it was great. As soon as he said it, I was like, I don't know, Dr. Bedell, because if that's true, I still would follow you, and I don't know you at all.
I love it. You've been listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. I'm Peter Stiefelman.
And I'm Jamie Amansan.
We will see you next week. See you, Jamie.
Yes, we will. See you later.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. We are proud to be imperfect leaders, so join us next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast.